Now, and we are live. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Deceive Reality Podcast. We're here with the incredible Jonathan Goodwin, or the incredible Mr. Goodwin, as some people might know him from before. So Jonathan, thanks so much for being here. How are you?
I'm wonderful, thank you very much. I'm calling from Las Vegas, Nevada. It is noon here, and it is really hot and sunny. And I'm sitting in my car actually, which is terribly not glamorous. And I should be by the pool. Needs must, and I'm busy doing another project, so I've jumped into the car for a quiet place to sit. How are you guys?
Good, not too bad.
This is your new stunt that you're doing live on the podcast, sitting in a car in hot weather.
But there's a hose coming in, and I've got 40.
Brilliant. So we always start at the beginning, and usually with magicians, we ask them, why did you get into magic? And it's usually that you were shy, magic tricks were like something that helped you get out. So how did you start blowing yourself up and setting yourself on fire? I think it's a different story.
Probably a bit path. I read a book about Houdini. My dad gave me a book about Houdini when I was 7. And I guess like any kid of that age, I was super into all of the sort of comic book heroes from, that everybody was into, Superman and all of the hero sort of mentality. And I think the thing that really struck me and resonated about Houdini was he was real. He really did the things that I read about. And once I realized that you could actually do that, then I never really wanted to do anything else. And then I guess, I sort of decided that early that's what I wanted to do. And I would practice, doing all of the things that I thought I needed to know in order to be able to kind of do it for a living. And it's kind of been that way ever since.
My own kind of story is kind of similar. I remember watching the old Houdini movie with Tony Curtis with my dad really, really early on. And I was already into magic, but the escape thing kind of just drew me in then. And I think that kind of danger, kind of darker side of magic was more kind of organic and kind of real part of magic, I guess. And that's how I kind of got drawn in the same kind of way.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing. I mean, I honestly, I was kind of into it for a while, and then I kind of had a sort of not that it ever really wavered, but I had other interest that grew out of it. I wanted to be an actor for a while, and I did my degree in drama and theatre at university, and then I became good friends with I'm sure viewers will be familiar with a British mentalist and mind reader called Darren Brown. And Darren was my flatmate for a while, and we hung out, we became firm friends. And through him, I got to know all of the people that worked at the production company that he was working for. And there were many sort of real giants in sort of TV magic that worked for that company. And so that was kind of a bit of a proving ground, and I was writing and producing TV shows, and then they made a special with an escape artist. I was actually I didn't think it was very good, like 21, and I at that point I wasn't really performing escapes, although I had practiced for years, and I just didn't think it was good. And so as a cocky 21-year-old, I emailed the executive producer and told him that I thought his show was shit. And rather than tell me where to go, he said, well, film something and put it on camera. So I did, and it sort of worked. And I then all of a sudden I was a professional escape artist, and I haven't really changed gear or tack from that ever since. So yeah, I mean, it just goes to show that sometimes the squeaky wheel gets the grease, and if you've got an opinion and
you have to take a risk kind of a thing and just kind of push yourself and put yourself out there. I mean, was that the first TV stuff? The was it Dirty Tricks? Was it that's the first?
Well, so I had done a show which was like kind of a magic show for that production company called Monkey Magic.
Magic, yeah.
Sort of all of the dark, kind of dangerous stuff in that show, and then Yeah, then I wrote and consulted for another couple of shows. I became good friends with the guys from that show. When they went off, they were very sort of keen close-up magicians, and I have always had a bit of a sort of TV producer head. So I produced a show with Pete Furman and Ali Cook called The Secret World of Magic, with Anthony Owen, bless him, and then yeah, the first sort of escape performance where I stopped doing any of that stuff and just went into stunts was Dirty Tricks, and that kind of worked really well. And then I persuaded them to give me a special, which was called The Seven Stupidest Things to Escape From.
Yeah.
And then I it really went from there. I made a few other different things in the UK, and then I got a call from Discovery Channel here in the States to see if I wanted to go and make a special and a series for them.
Out of the seven stupidest things, which one did you think was the stupid? I know in the show people will find out, but which one did you really think was the one that was like not a good idea?
Well, probably the one that didn't air, actually.
Okay.
I was one of my claims to fame. So Channel 4 in the UK is has or at least had a reputation for being sort of quite edgy and quite extreme in the stuff that they could broadcast. And one of my claims to fame is that I did something that Channel 4 refused to broadcast, which was that I was sewn up inside a dead cow and escaped through its arse. It was pretty gross. I'm not going to lie. I wouldn't recommend it to any other budding escape artists.
That's definitely not in any of the Houdini books, Jonathan. No way.
But you know what? It is actually that where the inspiration came from. And there's a bit of a sort of discrepancy. I mean, you'll know this, that Houdini was nothing if not a consummate bullshit artist, and so it's very difficult to kind of get through. But he was sewn up inside either a whale or a giant turtle once, and escaped from it. I mean, it really can't have been pleasant, because whether it was a whale or a turtle, I'm pretty sure it had washed up and somebody had a bright idea. Whereas at least the cow that I was in was fresh. So, I just smelled like steak for an afternoon. But I mean, Houdini was pushing the limits even back then.
There you
All
go.
I can picture is Ace Ventura coming out the back of the rhino.
That was the other influence. Absolutely, was that I would, or maybe the Tauntauns in Star Wars. But it was fine. So I was tied up, and then they pulled all of the insides out, and then they put me in it, and then laced it up like a big shoe. It was really hard, actually. I'm not going to lie. It was half a cow, because obviously that there's half of it on top of you. He's very heavy, and I couldn't breathe, and I managed to get my hand out first, and then my dad, who used to help me in all of my TV escapes, he's a bit of a comedy genius, an accidental one at least, and so completely unprompted, he walked over and shook my hand through the arse of a cow.
Nice.
We have to get that footage somehow.
Nobody's ever seen it. I can send you a photo, but maybe myself and the executive producer are the only people that have a copy of it, and I think I'm probably going to keep it that way. I don't want to get Peter.
And America's Got Talent or Britain's Got Talent didn't allow that to be part of your audition, no?
Do you know what? I thought about pitching that, and then maybe I thought better of it. I think maybe I don't know that Britain was ready for it in 2004, and I don't think they're ready for it now. That's for sure.
Definitely. One thing I was wondering about, because you've been on Britain's Got Talent and America's Got Talent, did you find much of a difference working on the two shows?
Yes. One of the shows was an absolute joy to work on, And one of the shows was an absolute nightmare, and I will leave it at that.
That's fair enough.
It's because people can guess.
One of the stunts that definitely struck out in my mind was the one with the car wash.
Oh yeah, God, you.
And I'm sure, like, when you went to your dad, I mean, I'd be the same. My dad passed away nearly 2 years ago now, but I used to come to him with ideas for things, and he'd be like, "Are you sure now? Are you you know?" And it'd be that kind of conversation, and you could see that, you know, you have to be careful, you know. But you know, if you're sure now, you can, kind of a thing. But I'm sure, did you have that with your dad? It would be like, "Are you sure now? A car wash, Jonathan?"
100%. I mean, my dad was a cop and a fireman, so we would genuinely not tell him what we were going to do, and he knew his role was to like listen patiently and then ask me if I was sure and then call me an idiot. But then we would stop before we actually did the escape, and usually then he would like ask me a bunch of questions about the sort of, you know, what we had planned from the point of view of making sure that I was going to die. And most of the time he would go, okay, yeah, I probably would have done that, you know, like, you know, back in the day. But there were a couple where he was like, no, thank you. And actually the one that made him stop doing it was the very first time I was buried alive. Yeah, I did that live on TV for Channel 4, and I was buried under 6 tons of liquid concrete, and that pushed his buttons. He was like, I didn't enjoy that. I don't want to do this anymore. Thank you. And, you know, I have to respect that. You know, making him stand there and watch his only son do something, you know, that extreme. But for the most part, he was very good-natured about it, actually. And I know secretly he misses it. My dad was very much a frustrated performer himself, so, you know, he enjoyed being part of it.
There's definitely a kind of a touch of the, like, what Jack Whitehall is doing with his dad at the moment. Maybe you could get your dad to start doing crazy stuff all over the world with you again.
I know. Do you know what? It's funny. So my career was backwards, really. Because I was lucky enough that my TV career came first, and then I had no live version of what I did on television at all, and it took me a long time to be able to like work out what it was on stage. But I was booked. There was a guy. He's retired now, but you might know, in LA, called Mark Cannon. He used to run it was basically the only escape artist store in the world. And Mark used to do an escape artist convention in California, like every couple of years, and he invited me to perform. And it just so happened that my dad was visiting at the time with my mum, and so I said, "Do you want to do it? You know, for old time's sake," because it had probably at that point been about 10 years since he'd, like, you know, helped me. And he did. And do you know what? He did a really great job. My dad is a ham. He's a real overactor. And so I had to really coach him. We're back when we were doing the TV as well, you know, so that he didn't oversell it. Because obviously on TV, anything that you do, all of your expressions are massively magnified. And so subtlety is the key. And on stage a little bit as well. So I did an escape, which I haven't done in a long time, where I was vacuum sealed in a bag, which, if you're claustrophobic, is really unpleasant. And it's amazing because it's just air pressure. It's just the outside air pressure that's restraining you, but it's incredibly restrictive. And obviously you can't breathe either. And I said, so my dad sort of tied me up and then put me in the bag and then sucked the air out and sealed it. And he was like, "How do you want me to play it?" And I said, "Okay, here's what you do. Don't do anything at all. Just stand there, stony faced, nothing, right? And then after about, you know, a minute and a half, just take the pair of scissors that are on the table off the table. But the way to do that is to try and do it in a way that nobody sees you do it. Try and make it as subtle as you possibly can, okay? And then just keep them in your hand. And that's all I want you to do. And he was like, okay, fine. And that's what I did. And what was so satisfying is there's a load of magicians and escape artists that were watching. It was basically an audience of escape artists. And so many of them came up to me afterwards like, your dad was bricking it. He was so, you don't know this, but what he did at like about a minute and a half, he got the scissors and he was ready to cut you out, which is brilliant. He just played it perfectly. So he needed a little bit of managing, but he was a gem. And the other great reason that you'll know this, that it helps to use your dad, is that he's cheap. He works for love, so that was easy too.
Definitely, I think that's something that people miss a lot in the escape artist style, is the theatrics of it, and it's those little things that I think push it above. Even I was watching earlier on today your escape on Britain's Got Talent, where the sand or gravel was falling down on you, and there's a little moment where you're completely covered, and then your hand just slowly comes through the gravel to the glass, and it's like that little moment of the tension and getting people that it's the story really is important.
You have to have there has to be a fine line, really, between, and I always try and opt for like underplaying it, because if you go slightly too far the other way, it becomes cheesy, and you cut all of the tension. So it's it's a real dance, that, but that's a really unpleasant escape. I did it every day for a whole season. I was in London last year in the summer, in the West End, and I was pulling little bits of gravel out of orifices for a very long time after I finished performing that stunt. It's not my favorite thing to do, but it works, and it was good. I enjoyed that one on BGT.
Yeah, we have some questions actually. We asked people to message us in, and I think it's kind of touched on a bit. And James messaged in that what stunt that you've done would you never do again?
I have a couple. I have done. If it's something that I'm going to put on television, then because usually the TV ones are more extreme than I would do on stage, because you only have to really do it once. Whereas the crafting stuff for stage, you have to hit all of the notes, but at the same time it has to be something that you can do three times in a day if that's what you're being booked for. And so a couple of the TV ones I've done and I was happy with, and I would never do again, I don't think. And the one that immediately comes to mind is I did a stunt where I was covered in 200,000 bees, and that sucked a lot. But I did it twice originally, because it was one of the stunts in the Seven Stupidest Things to Escape From, and I had an image of what I wanted it to look like, and in that version I was sitting in a box, and the bees were above me, and then we pulled the trap and they fell on me. And that sucked a lot, but it also didn't look like I wanted it to. Like I wanted to be completely covered, and I wasn't. That was about 50,000 bees, and so then the second time I did it was for Discovery Channel, and we actually got the guy who was, I don't know whether he might not still be alive. He was an elderly gentleman, but he was brilliant, and his name was Dr. Norman Gary, and he was an apiarist, which is a scientist who studies bees, and he was the guy that back in the day isolated the pheromone of the queen, and so rather than having them drop on me, I was wearing like a big body stocking thing, and he just put this little drops of liquid on my body, and then would throw the bee in, like he had like a scoop, like a pick and mix scoop of that he would get the bees, and then he'd throw them in the air and they'd just come and land on me. And it took about 45 minutes to cover me, but I was completely covered. It was very heavy actually, then I got into a box. I was that was on top of a washing machine that was set to 30 seconds before spin cycle. So I had 30 seconds to escape before the whole thing got shook to shit.
Yeah, I remember seeing that. I only saw that recently. Yeah.
Yeah, it sucked. So I was probably stung about 35 times, and both times that I did it, I went into toxic shock afterwards, which is really horrendous. It's like when I did it for Discovery, it was in California, and it was in the height of the summer. It's the hottest day of the year, and I couldn't stop shaking and shivering because of all of the venom that was going through my body. And then probably felt like I'd been, 3 rounds with Tyson for the next week after that. It was really awful.
Yeah, I feel really bad now because I spent 5 minutes yesterday running away from a bee outside a restaurant with a burger. It did fly into my eye though, which is not a pleasant feeling.
That's why you're a mentalist, Dave. That's why.
Yeah. It just really sucked, and because I've done it and I've got the footage, I don't really have a big desire to do it again, to be honest. So that one I think is probably that's my answer.
We had another one in here from Anthony, a good friend of ours. He was asking, how did you come up with the idea for the one nail bed of nails?
Well, what I like to do is I like to I take my influence from performers of the past and things, but my mantra, I don't really like to do things that other people do, and I like to do things that people have never seen before. And I played around with a bed of nails for different ways, and then I just thought to myself, well, what would be the most extreme version of that you could do? Could you do it with less nails? How few nails could you do? Well, shit, could you do one nail? I mean, it was the thought of about 30 seconds. And then to go from there to actually being able to physically do it was a while. And I haven't finished that act actually either. I think that there's more to come from it. Because I think that it's actually okay, and I've done it enough. I basically now have scar tissue on my back from having done it so much that over time it's got easier. And so because of that, I think that I can push it and maybe find different ways to increase the weight that's on me. At the end of the act that I do on stage, they put a cinder block on me and break it. That's fine, unless it doesn't break. Who just doesn't quite swing it hard enough. And then all of the impact from that blow just goes straight onto the nail, and that sucks.
Yeah, then it becomes kind of like a David Blaine spike through the body type stunt.
I mean, I early days I would bleed every time I did it actually, but now I've sort of built up my tolerance to that.
It's a cool way of thinking. It's a cool way that you rethink it, because it's like reverse engineering the bed of nails. Because I suppose traditionally they would have we'll put loads of nails in it, look really impressive, but you're like stripping it back just to one nail.
That's also how it works. Obviously, it was if you go back into the history of Bed of Nails, it wasn't a performance piece. It was actually therapeutic, because it laying on one, but it actually feels pretty good. And the science of it is that all of the nails are exactly the same length. And so when you lay down, your weight is evenly distributed. So the more nails there are, the less it hurts. And the opposite is true as well. The fewer nails, the more it hurts. It was co-opted by sideshow performers to kind of as a demonstration. And the great thing about all of those sideshow gags is that almost all of them look horrendous and are actually not that bad at all.
Yeah. Because we have someone in here as well asking, who inspires you the most at the moment? Is there anybody you're looking around?
At the moment, I'm a big fan of all of the sort of the Red Bull guys, and different people on Instagram that I follow. Actually, there's an awesome guy if you don't follow, you should. I think his Instagram handle is Jacob Acrobat, and he's just incredible. He basically does all of these really amazing, they're sort of juggling feats, really, where he'll like, I don't know, I'm sure I'm like imagining one now, but it is also probably something that he could do, where he's like got like, I don't know, a grape between his between his toes, and he'll close his eyes and throw a knife in the air, and it'll come down straight and land in the grape that's between it.
Like, I just saw him the other day, actually. Yeah, he was throwing darts between his toes as well.
Yes,
and
right.
Yeah.
He's absolutely unbelievable, and I'm very jealous of everything that he does and all of his skill. But that's one of the great things about the internet and YouTube and Instagram and all of those things is that there's a platform now for people to kind of put their skills out there. Most of my inspirations, though, come from performers from the past. People that, because 100 years ago there was no health and safety. There was no people weren't doing risk assessments. So if you had an idea that was crazy enough, nobody was going to stop you. So for example, the stunt that I just did on America's Got Talent, the zip line hanging from my teeth, came from, I saw a video of a lady called Tiny Klein, who is a Hungarian circus performer, and she did that in circus. That act, very very few people do it, but it's called Iron Jaw, and she did an Iron Jaw zip line across Times Square in about 1931. And she was flying. She was booking it like way faster than I was going. My thing wasn't really about the speed. It was more about the escape part of it. But I just remember seeing that probably about 10 years ago and being like, that one, I want to do that. So I learned, and it took a long time to realize it. I actually tried to do that escape once before for NBC for The Illusionists, and we didn't make it work. It was all a big disaster. It's a very, very difficult and complicated thing. And so it was a real pleasure to exercise the demon of that and actually pull it off. And I was really happy with it. I thought it went really well.
Yeah, it looked really good as well. Like you can see the tension in everybody watching it. Like and at the end, because you initially said you won't be able to see. So everybody's thinking blindfold, and then you're just looking straight up. So it's a nice like throwaway from what people were expecting.
Yeah, oh, that's good. I hadn't thought of that, but that's nice to know. Thank you.
Yeah, I was expecting to see that metal blindfold that you see, because I see a lot of people who watch your stuff as well when you're like the Daredevil, and people are like, though his assistants are the Daredevils. How do you find assistants who are willing to stand there with a balloon in their teeth and that sort of stuff?
Yeah, it's funny that, isn't it? I've never really had anybody that has worked with me sort of back out of that ever. And I think the thing about the crossbow is that it's so fast, you don't really have a moment to be afraid, because by the time you realize that I've pulled the trigger, the arrow's in front of you, or whatever. And the weirdest one that we ever did, and I really didn't think that we were going to be able to do this. So I technically have the record for the longest distance to make the William Tell shot. They don't publicize dangerous records really, because they want people to try and beat them. And so we didn't even really get into the Guinness thing, but we did it at 120 yards, which is a really long way. And I did it with a member of the public, actually, the apple above their head. We had a backup in case somebody said no.
In case you killed them.
Yeah, it was nuts, and I was expecting them to say no. We had 40 people there, and 12 of them were willing to do it, which is amazing, isn't it? You know, there are a lot of stupid people in the world.
How many takes did it take before? Like, how many of those people died then of the 12?
Well, exactly. We got through 7 of them, and then we did it. It was a very stressful day, but I was proud of that one. Actually, it went off without a hitch. I mean, it had to, but you know, at that point, we're getting down into like levels of humidity in the air, and like the you know, we obviously were inside, so that we couldn't have any sort of wind or breeze or anything like that would affect it. If you're shooting a projectile that kind of distance, and you need it to be that accurate. But crossbows are cool. I played with them for a really long time, and it's a really interesting science. I have a friend of mine, actually he's an Irishman. His name is Gabe Connolly. He was Sean Connery's stunt double. When Sean went like Silver Fox, because Gabe looks exactly like that, but he's actually basically James Bond. He's talented man that I've ever met in my life. You'll probably know this, but in order to be, there's a union in the UK for stunt people, and partially it's there because they don't want other people to get the jobs. But in order to be in that union, in the UK, you have to be at Olympic level or higher in 7 disciplines, right? So there are very, very few people who like get that good at stuff. And Gabe was one of those guys. And I remember going to see him once. I'm digressing, so forgive me. But I remember going to see him once, and I'm like, he spoke like 6 different languages. And he's the Olympic level. He represented Ireland at archery in the Olympics. That was his specialty. And I visit him, and I go to knock on the door, and I stop because I'm listening. He's like playing classical guitar and serenading his wife. I mean, he's just the most obnoxiously talented person you've ever met. But Gabe told me a story. He was invited to, because he was a longbow archer, and he did all of the archery shots on like the Prince of Thieves movies, the movie, and the Robin Hood stuff. He was invited to do a test, with like a ballistics test with his longbow, and they had a handgun, I think a Magnum, and then Gabe had his, or maybe a shotgun as well, and Gabe had his longbow, and they were shooting through a piece of toughened plastic and then bulletproof glass. And the handgun didn't really go far through the toughened plastic. The shotgun sort of peppered it and went a little way through it and into the bulletproof glass. The Magnum went through the bulletproof glass, through the plastic and halfway through the bulletproof glass. And then Gabe had to go with his bow, and it went through the whole thing. And the reason is, and this is fascinating, is that an arrow is the most it is the most penetrative projectile that anybody's ever designed, because it gets 2 bites to the cherry. So you have the moment of impact, and then when the arrow hits, the whole thing bows like that, if you watch it in slow motion. And then once it bows out, it straightens up again, and then it gets a second push of impact. And so that's why it went all the way through. So you can fire an arrow through a concrete wall easily. It's amazing.
Incredible.
Incredible.
You can see why the Huns took over the world with the composite bow and horse back then. It's just it's incredible.
Well, you were saying that you kind of started your career when then you thought about acting and stuff like that. Did you ever consider like movie stuntman and go down that road?
You know, I didn't, and and a lot of my good friends do that job. But to be honest, it doesn't really appeal to me, and for 2 reasons. The main reason is that it's really, really fundamentally different to what I do, because a stuntman in a movie, those guys, what they do really has to work in like sections of 7 seconds. You know, you have 7 seconds of action, and then you cut, or you do it again but from a different take, and then you'll have a different method of safetying this, that, and the other. And what I do, and what I know you do, basically has to work in a one. It has to work, in a to be viewed by an audience. Somebody needs to watch that and see it and know that is actually what's happening, because that's the purpose of it. It's an entertainment. So as much as there is a crossover of the skills, at the same time, those guys couldn't do what I do, really, and I really can't do that. I don't have the training for it, and it takes a long time to kind of get into that world, and also get the knowledge that they have to have in order to be able to solve the problems, to be able to make something work in a movie. There is a little bit of a crossover, and I have done a little bit of sort of stunt design and stunt coordinating for different projects. I did I created all of the stunts at the end of Death by Magic, which is a Netflix show, and I did a thing the other day with my friend Piff, the Magic Dragon, did a thing for TBS where we burned him at the stake.
Nice.
I've done a lot of body burn stuff, and those skills are sort of comparable. I've probably done a lot more fire than most stunt people, actually. But it's you pick and choose your different sort of skill sets.
Yeah, definitely.
Because I definitely think that when you were on fire upside down, did straitjacket escape on fire? Because I see a lot of people who look at escapologist and like, oh, it's probably a trick lock, it's a trick straitjacket, and then I just go, watch this, flames. You can't fake that. That's on CGI fire.
I mean, I know that when you're apparently because obviously I haven't experienced this, but apparently you can feel the heat from that gag usually in about the first 7 rows of the audience. That the fuel that I use there burns at about 2,500 degrees, so it's very, very hot. And no faking it. That was a long time. That was probably a good, I don't know, maybe 10 years of working on that. And there was there are a couple of times where I did get quite badly burnt and was like, this is stupid, let me put it away. But then slowly and surely I kind of got a bit more confidence, learned a bit more, and then went back to it. But it's a complicated and very intense thing. I have a new one which I've just developed, which is a standing burn stunt, which I also did on AGT and was bitterly about how it came out. I posted on my Facebook, on my social media, what that stunt was supposed to look like, but we just got burned by the wind, which is just not something that we can control. And so all of the fire went backwards because the wind was blowing directly at me, and so it didn't really look like I was that on fire at all. But if anybody wants to go and check out my Facebook, you'll see what it was supposed to look like. And when I do it again, I might end up doing that on stage. I'm proud of it. I don't think anybody's done anything like it. So
it's a great extension, because I mean you see a lot of magicians who want to make a headline and they'll do a hanging upside down straitjacket escape or something like that, and it became because Houdini popularized it, and then it just became kind of duplicated all over. But I think what you did to it recently with that, that's the next level of that. It's kind of an extension of I think that's in time probably like Houdini probably or somebody like that would have done something maybe similar. So I think that's a great kind of level up for that effect.
Yeah, and the genesis of the straitjacket escape, you go from Houdini doing it, and then I think the person that really took it to the next level for the longest time was Alan Allen, because he was the guy that put the burning rope into it, which was a real stroke of genius. But for me, I have a bit of a love-hate relationship with the straitjacket escape, because I think it has now become the opposite of what it was originally intended to be. Because when Houdini did it for the very first time, it was known by the public as this device that was inescapable. That was the perfect restraint. And now people don't really use them anymore from the point of view of a real world object. The only time anybody ever comes in contact with a straitjacket is when they see a magician or an escape artist getting out of one. And so it's changed from being this inescapable thing to something that people know, oh, you can get out of that. I've seen people do it, you know,
like a prop. Yeah,
kind of become the opposite of it. And so I sort of fought it for a long time. The other side of it is that it is a recognizable image, and so that's why I ended up putting it into the body burn. But I think, you know, if one of the things that I kind of have made a big move towards in escapes, and I'm not sure there were many people that were taking this tack before I did, although maybe people will correct me, is that you know, that the narrative of an escape is always was, you know, either, you know, if it was Houdini, I'm going to try and see if I can get out, and then that sort of became a bit boring because honestly, who cares? And then it became, I'm going to try and see if I can get out before this bad thing happens to me, you know.
Yeah.
And my take on it, and I try and do this as much as I can, is a bad thing is happening to me, and I have to get out in order to stop it. Because what's the escapes as they're traditionally done, I've got to get out before the bad thing happens.
And you've got the countdown timer type. Yeah.
They're sort of inherently disappointing because you think you're going to see something sort of tremendously exciting or some sort of disaster happen, and then you don't, you know, and the excitement comes from how close you can get to the near miss. But those near misses are quite difficult to get right. And so, yeah, my philosophy is, let's do both things. Let's have the bad thing happen, and then, you know, and then when I get out, I can make it stop, and everybody's relieved that the bad thing's happening. So, being on fire is a good bad thing to want to.
Yeah, and people can relate to it. Like you said, you can't fake it. There's no fake fire.
Yeah, exactly.
And based off that, I think we're just coming up. We're 42 minutes in, so I said we'd go to the good, the bad, and the ugly to finish up. So basically, a story that started off good, went bad, and ultimately ugly, or just some performance that went horribly wrong.
Okay, I mean, I've got quite a lot of those. Here's one that where I ended up actually ugly. So I did a stunt where, and again, a lot of the time for me, the things that go wrong tend not to go wrong during the actual performance. They go wrong in rehearsal. Like when I broke my leg, for example, I wasn't doing an escape. I came off a zip line, and I didn't. I was going to be tied to it, doused in gasoline, and there's a bonfire at the bottom. And what I should have been thinking, holy crap, I'm going too fast. And I was just thinking, okay, there's the camera, let go now. And so I fell probably 8 feet, but I was going 25 miles an hour, and you know, it's hard to bounce in that instance. But it was a rehearsal. It wasn't an actual performance. It was just frustrating. And again, I did a thing. I made a show called Dangerman for the BBC, and we did a stunt where I was tied to a weight in the middle of a lake, and I pitch over the side and get dragged straight to the bottom. And it was this really stupid mistake because what I did, I don't know, either of you scuba divers, have you ever done any of that stuff?
I've done a bit, but not a massive amount.
So spot the deliberate mistake. So I was concerned because I was going to go down to the bottom. I mean, pretty deep, like 40, 50 feet deep lake, tied to this weight. And obviously I was going to go down quite quickly, and I was concerned about my ability to equalize the pressure.
Yeah.
And if you're a scuba diver, you know that the way that you do that is you squeeze your nose and blow, and that equals the pressure. But my hands are tied to a weight, so I was really concerned about my ability to do that. And so I thought, bright idea, what I'll do is I'll put a nose plug on my nose, and then I can blow against that, and that'll. And to my defense, there was a safety diver with me, and he thought that was a good idea as well. It was a very bad idea. And so I put this thing on, and we're doing the thing, and I get tied up, and I pitch, and I go straight down, and I'm blowing, and I'm blowing, and I'm blowing. But what I hadn't realized, and what the safety diver hadn't realized as well, is that when you're scuba diving and you go deep, you don't just equalize your ears, you equalize the airspace in your mask as well. That is also another airspace that is being squeezed or pressurized. And so that mask, and the way you do that is you blow out, you put air into it through your nose, and that equalizes the pressure. But I couldn't do that because I had a clothespin on my nose, and so that mask went up against my face, and my eyes started to come out of my eye sockets in the mask, and I escaped probably a bit quicker than I would have done ordinarily, and got my hands free and flooded the mask so that at least I wasn't experiencing that anymore. And then I swam back to the surface, and I had ruptured all of the blood vessels in my eyes, and the whites of my eyes were just completely red. So I looked, as I said, at the, it's quite an appropriate thing, because I certainly looked pretty fucking ugly at that point. But the plus side of the thing was that it was roughly this time of year, so I didn't have to pay any extra money for a Halloween costume.
Zombie done.
Madness.
That's definitely not what you want to happen. But I could just imagine the people up in the boat being like, "This is going to be fine," and then red eyes appear out of the water.
It was gnarly, but nobody died. That's my baseline,
Yeah, that's a job well done.
Whenever anybody asks me how did the show go or how did the stunt go, my response usually is nobody died, because that's my baseline, and I think it's a good one to live by.
That's a very good one. And just before we go, based off what you've been saying, one of the questions that came in was, how do you identify yourself as? Would you be an escapologist, freak show, sideshow, stunt person? What is the label?
I call myself a theatrical daredevil, and that's it, because I'm taking risks and I'm doing dangerous things, but it's not for me. I'm not a Red Bull guy. I'm not doing this stuff to see if I can, and I'm not doing it, for sponsorship from an energy drink. It's because I want to create a show, and so that's where that comes from.
That's brilliant, and I think we'd both like to say thanks so much for coming on, and we
pleasure.
Really appreciate it. We hope you enjoy the rest of your day, and for everybody else, we'll be back again next week. I think we've got someone lined up. Steve, do you want to say who we've got next week, or we'll leave it a surprise?
We'll leave it as a surprise. We'll announce it during the week. We'll do that little mystery thing to keep people guessing. But thanks so much, John. That was great. It was good to chat.
Thank you so much.
Thanks so much. We'll see you next time.